This meeting for Wednesday, June 17th. It will now go into session. There will be no public comments because this is live streamed. Approval of minutes. These minutes are not correct.
Have you read them since you've arrived?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have something to state at this time, or are you going to do that at a later date?
What?
What's wrong with the minutes?
I'm getting ready to tell you. I was just
Okay.
looking for it. The motion ended forthwith. This part about the State Board of Elections was not brought up until the end of the meeting as a clarification by James. You can't amend a motion 20 minutes later without bringing it to the floor and getting a vote on accepting that amendment. So this is misleading.
Are you talking about the last?
The last sentence there.
Okay.
I'm not sure where you are and what you're talking about.
I'm on the first paragraph on page 2. And it starts out Board of Elections. Okay. That the third sentence, sending it to the state board for final determination was not part of that motion.
Yes, it was.
No, you brought that up at the end of the meeting with the clarification.
I reiterated it. I'm with you that there's some more work needs to be done on the minutes, but you're not correct in stating that I did not. I did bring it up during the motion.
Right, you did.
And I reiterated it later.
That's not in your written motion that you sent over.
It is.
Okay, well, we can do some more research on that and get it fixed.
So will these minutes be tabled until the next meeting?
Yes, so we'll table these.
Are we gonna continue on with missing?
No, we're gonna table
Stop
these
now.
unless you have something you need corrected.
the votes, there was more than 3 of us. See, vote aye.
Yeah.
I will add that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else with the minutes?
Under that same page at the bottom, Cofield provided subcommittee update as follows. The purchases that the election department makes, that presentation was by Ken.
I'm sorry, you back to the minutes?
Yes. Page 2, number 1.
Page 2, number 1.
Okay.
And what are you, I'm sorry.
Well, just the way it's written, it looks like you did all that, but it was Ken that did the presentation on bidding. She says, Cofield provided subcommittee update as follows.
I'll note that.
Yeah. Did you bring the communications plan?
Yes.
Good, I forgot it.
Are we done with the minutes? You
Yes.
said a couple
Okay.
minutes ago you were tabling them and then we went back to it.
I
Are we
know.
done with the minutes?
I know, it's old
Sort of.
people
I
time.
know, but all of us are trying to
That's all the
follow
minutes.
old
Yeah.
people, so.
Okay.
Okay, communications plan.
The director's report.
Oh, director's report, I'm sorry.
The Dropbox has been installed, which I think you saw that when you came in the last time, and the signage has been added to the Dropbox in the front of the admin building. And the drop box will be checked twice daily for if anyone comes, and drops anything off in there that does not want to come into the building. And County Manager Robert Outen had it put on in that location so that if anyone wanted to drive up, they wouldn't have to get out of their car. So even people that are not able to get out, or if the weather's bad, they can drop it off.
Now, they can drop off anything there, right? Registrations, requests for ballots.
Absentee ballot requests, voter registration forms. Also, sure.
May I'm sorry to interrupt you, Michelle, and I was gonna bring this up during our committee report, but since we're talking about the Dropbox, I might as well ask the question now. Is it possible, and this is a question, is it possible for us to have a Dropbox at least the other two early voting sites?
We only have to have one here, need to have one here. If anyone needs to drop off something at the voting sites, they would need to give it to the chief judge because of security.
Okay. I'm not sure that security answers the question, because if it's locked and if it's checked at the end of
answer
the
is
day.
no.
Okay,
We cannot have another drop
Okay.
box.
thank you.
The commissioners approved the elections department budget, so there were no changes in our budget. So we have that to work with this November. Soil and water filing began at noon on June 8th and will continue through noon on July 6th. And I've also updated the website with some, this falls into the communication plan, but I've also updated the website with forms that have the county Board of Elections address on them.
Good.
So absentee ballot request forms, and other items that we have, notice of deceased voters, as well as cancellation of registration. So those have been added to the website, and we'll go into more detail about that, or you can check out the website and see those changes. So that's all I have today.
Okay. Have you been working with Beth on the website too?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Well, we can get into that when we get on here too. Okay. Do you want to give the report?
Yeah. What I just handed out, these are 8 things that we are working on. First, we want to review all the forms and documents, make sure they're up to date, which Michelle is already doing here, and made to conform with the new state law. And wherever we can, we want to replace the generic wording, such as contact your local board, with the actual address and number of the Dare County Board of Elections. And of course, we'll get those approved before the changes are made. We want to redesign and rewrite these informational brochures, because we have to make sure those comply with the new law. The 3 of them are the student poll worker recruiting guide and application, the MAT brochure, and the application for poll workers. Third, we want to update the website with user-friendly current information. And hopefully we'll have fresh videos and photographs to reinforce the safety of voting in 2020 and provide links to forms that can be downloaded. With the DMV partnership, et cetera, we will coordinate that with Michelle and with the Dare County PR. 4, we will provide bi-weekly Q&A columns with our journalist here to the media to educate the public about topics such as absentee ballots, provisional ballots, early voting, electioneering, placement of names on ballots, etc. Again, coordinate with Michelle and Jackie. We want to reach out to young or soon-to-be voters through promoting the Student Poll Worker Assistant Program. So since school is not really in session, we'll have to go through the contacts we can come up with. We will coordinate that with the school officials and Michelle. And then something we met on yesterday, we want to create a voter registration training video for librarians so that they can know the rules and law themselves and also help patrons This guidance is actually mandated by the state to occur every 2 years, which Sandy found out. The video also can be used to educate the public. The county is paying for the cost of the video, but the videographer needs additional funds to play actors. So we'd like to get approval for a budget amendment for $250. We'll develop posts for social media, coordinate with public relations. We'll create ads for print and web advertising related to column topics and/or website links for more information. So lots of communication going on that we've planned in an attempt to just make it reassuring and simple and safe.
We've met with Dorothy twice. Judy, Michelle, Jackie, and I have met with Dorothy and her staff twice. Once to go over the general plan, and that's when Dorothy offered to pay for the video. And yesterday, we had a phone conference. I had a phone conference. They had like a Zoom thing, but I'm not going to get tech with it. And talked to Chris Sewell, who is the videographer, and he is
Chris
out.
Hannett.
Hmm?
It's Chris Hannett.
What did I say?
Sewell.
Panic.
It's Chris Hannett.
Where did I get Sewell? We talked to him about length and what our target audience was, and we'll have to get back to him. They all know that we have to have approval from the board first. There's a lot of things that we can do. It sounds like a lot, but since all of it's connected, you use the same information, you just present it in different ways. So that's where we are.
We need a motion for the $250.
Pardon?
You want to make a motion for the $250 now, while we're at it?
Please.
I make a motion that we authorize $250 for the video actors, yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, we're also getting, in addition to our own budget from the county, we're also getting, I think it's $6,000 from the state to use for outreach and education, because they know there's going to be a lot of confusion this year.
Is that part of that $22 million that they put in to get that?
I think so,
Government money?
yeah. Yeah,
The care package.
yeah, because they care.
I might add if I can, I think that this is a good outline of the work that the subcommittee is doing. I think it is both good and necessary that we communicate with the public, given the challenges of what we expect to be happening for the November election. One question and one comment. The question is on the point number 4, the biweekly Q&A columns. Who is writing this?
Judy and I will write them, and then we'll send them to Michelle and Jackie to check to make sure that everything is correct in them.
I guess I'll have to think through that a little more. It sounds like maybe it's something that the board should weigh in on before we communicate to the public, as we traditionally do. Although if it's something that the staff does traditionally, that sounds okay, but
I think the problem with coming back to board with all these is right now, there's Beth, Sarah, Dorothy, Michelle, Jackie, and Judy and I working on all this stuff. And if we have to do that and then wait for board meetings and come back, I just think it's too cumbersome. I think as long as Michelle and Jackie see it, I think that should be adequate.
And you're referring to questions and answers like, how do I complete my absentee? Once I complete my absentee, when do I receive it?
Right.
That's what you're referring to.
That's right.
questions.
Nuts and
So
bolts.
it's just giving more detail rather than just going to the website and reading a column. It's getting more detail of circumstances people might find themselves in.
I think that's okay, for nuts and bolts,
Yes, and that's.
question and answers. But I will remind us that when we started down this road with subcommittees, that we said all decisions would come back to the board for a decision on, that the subcommittee would make recommendations. I think we generally ought to stay with that tone, but for the nuts and bolts kind of thing with question and answers, I'm okay with the staff making that decision. But all of the five of us are not on the same wavelength with any given issue. And I want to reiterate the road that we started down with respect to these two subcommittees, that we come back to this board for decisions.
Well, we're coming back to the board for an okay on the plan.
But we haven't seen the elements of it. Again, I'm saying, I'm not speaking for anyone else. I personally am okay with the question and answers, nuts and bolts, as you have explained it. Because it's the staff doing it, and all of the communication to date has been essentially written by the staff. So I'm okay with that. But I want to remind us, when these two committees were established, we said that the committees would come back to the board for a decision. So for number 4, I'm okay. But for the other 7 pieces of this report, I would like for your committee to come back to this board for a decision before they're implemented.
I don't know what the decision is. I mean, if you're approving the plan, we've told you what we plan on doing.
You know, let me make it simpler for you, Sandy. Suppose the logistics and operational planning committee had made the decision to go forward and implement precincts without it coming back to this board for review. I think you would have a problem with that. That is not the road we traveled down. The committee did work. The recommendations I will make today, and the other committee members will comment, but the decision is a board decision. It's not a subcommittee decision. So again, when we established these two committees, what we indicated, what we said was that the committees would come back to the board for decisions. And I think that's entirely proper. And I think that's the way we should continue to proceed.
If you want to see every piece of paper and everything that we do, then we can plan on having longer meetings. But to get this moving forward, there has to be some leeway here. And it hasn't been that many months ago that I tried to bring something to the board about communications, and you went right through the roof and said you didn't want to hear any more about it, that y'all had charged me to do communications with Michelle, and things shouldn't come back to the board.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but go
But
ahead.
with this, I mean, so when we get to the website, do y'all want to approve everything that's done to the website? I mean, some of these are going to be works in progress as we go.
And all of this isn't going to be reinventing the wheel. This is just reiterating information
Updating.
that's already out there. And Jackie and I will be reviewing this before we actually put it to publish. So if it's incorrect or misspoken, then we'll catch that and correct it. So I think what their plan is from our meetings that we've had, it's just a way to put out a question and answer for the public to read as to the process or how provisionals are interpreted, or absentee ballots that are cast. There's that rumor that they don't count or provisionals don't count or whatever. It's to clarify confusion that comes through during elections, but it's nothing new that's not already on the website.
At the risk of being misunderstood, let me say again that as we started down this road, our plan was that the subcommittees would do the work, come back to the board for decisions. I have no problem with number 4 on this plan. I would like for, because I just, this doesn't tell me enough about the content. And I would like for the board to review the content of some of the other matters. You have written a couple of times, Sandy, information, and I don't remember the specifics now, that would go out to the public. And you sent it to us, and there was a serious markup that the board members did, that Ken did, that Jim did, and I did before we approved them going out. So I want the same ability for the board to be able to edit and mark up what you have written. And that has proven to be absolutely necessary in the past. It probably will be necessary in the future. Communication is to represent the board, not the individual, not the communication from a single person. I'm not sure why it's so difficult to understand. You know, when you have written pieces in the past to go out, that there's been a serious markup by the other three people on this board, long before Judy was on the board. So I want to preserve the privilege of doing that going forward. I have no problem with number 4. And what is typically a staff job, duty, responsibility, I certainly don't, and I don't think the board has the intent of interfering with that. But there are pieces, there are elements of this plan that are entirely new. And I want to reserve the privilege of the board to review, comment, edit, and weigh in on those.
Could you be more specific? Which of these 8 things concerns you?
Well, that's a principle. I can't be more specific because this is a 1-page, 8-item
Yes,
sheet of paper with 8 elements on it.
We're
And
being efficient.
you're not specific in what this is going to be, so I can't be more specific.
we are
than the plan
translating
is.
existing knowledge and information that already appears on our website for the public.
Well, some of this does not appear on the website.
The principles are on the website. And tell me what you're worried about.
I'm not worried about anything, Judy. My comment is that the board has had a problem with communication pieces as they have developed in the past. And we've commented on those, we've edited those, we've weighed in on it. And I want to preserve the privilege of the board to do that going forward.
I think that the board had a problem with one thing, and it was the story to go along with those lists of removed and, what's the other word, Michelle?
Inactive.
List. And the biggest complaint I had from Ken, because older voters or older poll workers maybe some of them weren't going to work this election, and he took issue with that, and so it was changed. And I can't think of anything that's gone out to the public.
That's one, but then that's a good example, but there have been several pieces like that you've drafted. And if the board hadn't weighed in on it, then they would have gone out as you wrote it. And the board did not agree with those pieces. That's one that you mentioned. And I want to preserve the privilege of the board to review items that speak for the Dare County Board of Elections, period.
I'd have to say that I agree with that 100% because looking this over, the whole thing is very arbitrary and it's an open door. It says here, do whatever you want to do. And if you don't like it, too bad.
Well, if you notice in these, it does say that it will come before Jackie and Michelle for review.
And that
before
gives you
it's
final
actually-
approval on everything, right?
Yes. So it wouldn't go to the website. I would be the one adding it to the website. They do not have authority to add it to the website.
So
So it
back to
wouldn't
what we
go.
said before then, if you are the final word, again, the board doesn't have any control. So whatever they decide to present to you, if you just arbitrarily sign off on it, the rest of the board doesn't have any idea what you did.
Okay, so the board wants to see the Q&As, and the brochures.
Well, no, you are trying to go down you're twisting this.
No, I'm just asking a
No,
question.
I have said 3 or 4 times that I personally have no problems with number 4. The Q&As are number 4. Now, why would you then say, well, the board wants to review the Q&As?
Well, I don't
When I
know.
have, no, let me talk. When I have said 3 or 4 times that I personally have no problems with that, and you mentioned that as the first thing that the board wants to review. Let me say yet again, we started down this road with a statement that the 2 committees would work on various things.
Mhm.
We identified what those various things were, and that we would come back to the board for decisions. And so I would like to stay with that principle. I want to preserve for the board the ability to make decisions on these matters. There are some things here that that are new for the board. I mean, I think the things that are have traditionally been done by the staff, my own view, it's okay for the staff to do that. But we're going down a road with some new things. I just remember another thing. You made some comments some months ago about the poll worker applications. And
Yes.
there was so that's number 2, poll worker applications. And there were serious edits to that were made by staff, by board members. So I think there is intelligence to be gained when other people weigh in on matters. And I want to preserve for the board the privilege of weighing in and editing before something goes out in the name of the board.
Okay, could you be specific?
If you can be more specific about these 8 points on this one piece of paper, then I can be more specific about my comments. Can you be more specific about the 8 points on this one piece of paper here?
Sure, which one would you like more specifics
All
on?
of them that you want us to sign off on.
Okay, review all forms and documents to ensure they're up to date and that any changes made conform with the state law. Where allowable, replace generic wording such as contact your local board with the actual address of Dare County Board of Elections. Michelle has already answered that.
We're working on updating those.
Yeah.
And several of them have already been added to the website.
Redesign and rewrite informational brochures as needed for correct information.
Let me back up. That sounds straightforward. I would assume that the document that you rewrote some months ago would fall under this category.
What document?
The document about poll workers.
I don't really know what you're talking about. Do you know what he's talking about?
It was revised, I don't know, 4 months ago, 5 months ago.
Yes.
Yes.
If you're gonna do number 2 again, I would say this, go ahead and make up your list of what you want to do and then present it to the board and we'll look at it and see if it's viable. If it's not viable, we're gonna say no.
So you want to see,
Everything you're gonna change.
okay,
I'm not sure why you're having such reluctance accepting this.
I'm not reluctant. I'm just trying to clarify what it is you want. The student, the multi,
Well, basically what you're saying here with this is you want to change everything we do, period. And I want to know why, and I don't want to know what.
so that it reflects the law. These things were all changed in the most recent law that was passed.
I don't think that informational brochures are law.
The information has
I
to
don't think
reflect.
recruiting guides are law. I don't think applications are law.
Well, the laws
We-
are different. The laws have changed.
We
Why do
have-
you
we
want
have
to
ex-
change them then?
We have experience with this. You know, and other members of this board are well aware that you have made an attempt to draft documents in the past that when we reviewed them, the other members of this board reviewed them. We edited them, we commented on them, we changed a number of those items that you have. You thought it was straightforward, but when it was, when these documents were brought before other members of the board or all of the members of the board, there were some serious changes made to them. I want to preserve the ability of this board to make the final judgment of communication that goes out in the name of this board, period.
Okay, back to Jim's question about number 2. There have been changes in the law about the student poll workers. There have been changes in the law for this year about the multi-partisan assistant teams. And there's changes for the poll workers this year. Those things need to be updated in the brochures. It's not something that we're making up. It's in the laws that have just been passed to go with this year.
And
I don't mind bringing
all
this
of
back.
us accept that. And we want to change, you know, if the law's been updated, where the law has been updated, we want to make those changes.
Well, and that's what,
Well, what's your reluctance of bringing it back to the board?
so I'm just trying to find out what it is you want. Do you want the brochures back in before?
We want to see the final content before they are printed.
Approve the final content.
Okay. That's fine. Update website with user-friendly current information. Michelle,
With that, I want us to be able to approve everything you do to change the website with friendly, current information. We want to be able to look at it and look at the videos and the photographs and see what is being placed out there for the voter to see. We want to find out what kind of links are being set up here for the voter to download.
You are very reluctant to have the board review these items, but we have some history here. It's not like we're confronting this for the first time. I have made comments in the past about the website, and there have been comments that the whole board has had the opportunity to look at and weigh in on.
Yeah.
Why are you trying to short circuit the board review?
James, I'm not trying to short circuit anything. Michelle is working with Beth in PR, and they're coming up with a better way just to reorganize that stuff, and then so we can put the fresh stuff on there.
And I accept that you are working on that, and you're doing that with my blessing. What you are diverting from is the opportunity for this board to review communication. I think Jim answered it very simply. Everything, bring it back for the board.
I can't bring that back to the board because I'm not working on it. Michelle and Beth will be working on it. They're the ones familiar with it and have authority to go in there and start rearranging things. Now, if you want Michelle to bring back a list of everything they come up with, then that's fine. But it's, you know.
So if you're now saying somebody else is doing it and there's no review, that's even further problematic. This board should have the opportunity to review what goes out in the name of this board.
I just don't think you understand what you're asking for in this case. Do you want to give it a shot?
Everything that's on the website is just going to be rearranged and set up differently so that it looks newer, take out a little more of the wording and kind of make it more compact and more visibly pleasing and just more easy to use and to navigate through the website. It's not going to be putting anything out there that's not already out there.
And I think that's a good thing. I have made comments in the past to you and to others about the website of what I thought were deficiencies in the website. So I think reviewing, updating is a good thing. I'm just saying, I don't understand the reluctance of giving the board the opportunity to weigh in on it. The changes you are making to the website, you can submit to the board for us to review. And I might have a couple of things to add.
Can't you just email us those changes so we can look at them like we've done in the past? Can we just see what's going out so we can visually understand what we're signing off on? That's all. Just show us some sort of, this is what it's probably going to look like.
Well, if we get into that, then it would be having a meeting outside of a public meeting. because it would be something that you're trying to decide on, and we wouldn't be able to decide on it until we were in a public meeting.
Well, given this conversation, we probably ought to have a meeting in the not too distant future. And hopefully at that point, you'll have some of this content that you can put before us.
We have, our next meeting is
June,
June 30th.
it's 2 weeks from now, so
Put some content before us at the June 30th meeting.
Okay,
I mean, we walked in today and there's on one sheet of paper, there are 8 items. And I just don't know how you expect us to just sign off on this with no content whatsoever. This is a plan. I accept the plan. What I'm asking for, and I think what you're hearing from other board members, is before we sign off, we want to see more than a plan. We want to see some content.
okay.
Yeah.
All we asked today that you sign off on the plan.
Oh, no,
The
no,
plan
you
has
were.
not been executed yet. It's
Twist
not
that
been
as you
executed.
like. You were asking for more than a plan. That's what this conversation has been about the last 15 minutes, is you were asking more.
wrong.
Well, Sandy was certainly asking for more than adopting the plan. Did we vote on the plan?
I
I
don't,
move that we vote on that
All
we
right,
accept
let's
the
vote on the
plan.
plan.
That we accept the plan.
Second.
But that doesn't finalize anything.
No, it
That's-
doesn't.
No,
The
it's
plan
just
to
the
be
plan.
Executed.
Well, this conversation over the last 20 minutes has been lost.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. We do not have a logistics and operational planning committee.
Oh, but we do.
Oh, no, we don't. Go back to April 28th, when this was brought up and the 2 committees were formed. The committee was supposed to be looking at the health and safety of poll workers and voters. And that's why y'all went out and measured schools and did things like that. That is like a technical committee, and we're okay. But if it goes much further than that, then it is a quorum of the board on that committee, and everything would have to be done in open session.
I would, Michelle, do you have the minutes of the last meeting?
Did you say the 28th?
The 28th is when we came up with the committees.
Yes.
And the minutes of the last meeting, please?
The 26th?
Yes.
Right here.
Oh, the 26th is the minutes that were presented to us today, right?
Correct.
No, the prior minutes that we approved at the last meeting.
So it would be May 13th?
I suppose you're correct. The minutes that we approved at the last meeting.
So we had April 28th, and then we had a meeting on the 13th.
Okay, can I see your book for a second? Thank you. The minutes of the May 13th meeting, 2020 election plan, I'm reading from the minutes. It's an open meeting. A subcommittee of Cofield, Bucantis, Clark has begun visiting election day precincts to determine a plan for November's general election. Findings and recommendations will be shared at a later date. The committee has assumed responsibility for drafting an operation and logistics plan for the election, assuming the worst-case scenario, that we have coronavirus limitations in place and those recently put in place. It is possible that school gyms and/or cafeterias could be made available if needed. So For the purpose of emphasis, let me reread. The committee has assumed responsibility for drafting an operational and logistics plan for the election, assuming the worst case scenario.
That,
What about that is not clear, Sandy?
well, first of all, we never talked about logistics and operational plan in those words, but it was about distancing, finding the right locations to move precincts that needed to be done like that. It certainly didn't include bidding.
I beg to differ, and it's in the minutes. I mean, argue as much as you like. It is in black and white here. in the
Because you
minutes.
said it. It's not a motion. It's
This
not,
is in the minutes.
I don't care if it's in the minutes. That we can go back and listen, but that was just a comment made by you. It was a phrase made by you.
Okay.
It was election safety and security for the poll workers and the public, because we were afraid there were going to be fears about the health issues.
That is not correct. But I mean, I just don't see that we're getting anywhere about arguing this point.
Yeah, I agree.
So are we to number 5 on the agenda?
Yes.
First of all, it is the objective of the Logistics and Operational Planning Committee for the November election. It is the objective to, 1, create a safe and comfortable environment for poll workers, and 2, to create a safe, convenient, secure options for voters to exercise their right to cast a ballot for the candidates of their choice. The takeaway here is choice, giving voters the option of choosing between methods of voting. And it's fair to say we have really focused on that. Some elements with respect to options are not up to this board, as we're all aware. They're set down by the State Board of Elections. So within the constraints of what we being the Dare County Board is allowed to do, we've put a best efforts into in meeting these objectives. You have in front of you recommendations that we are making today regarding precincts. And you've had for a couple of weeks now, copy of a memorandum that I forwarded for informational purposes only to the Dare County Board of Education. And that was a request that they simply reserve certain schools for our use, with a clear indication that this board had not made a decision yet. But we felt it important to give some indication to the Board of Education that we would like to use these schools. As we've come to understand, gyms fill up pretty quickly with requests of outside groups to use various gyms. So at any rate, this was just an attempt to reserve some dates with the Board of Education to make our process as little disruptive as possible. So for precincts, this committee is recommending that we use various schools as voting sites for the November election. And we're recommending that we use one school as an early voting site. I am referring to and I'll go into detail with my memo that each of you received dated June the 7th, which was for informational purposes only. Let me back up for a second. We have reviewed and assessed each of the 16 sites, precincts in Dare County, all 16 of them, and made some assessment as to whether they were adequate for the November election in our judgment. And adequate meaning, could they handle the traffic, the voting traffic, with the social distancing, which we are now looking at, and we can only assume it will be at least that in November. Can these 16 precincts handle the social distancing requirements, for people waiting in line, and for actually being in the precincts? Is there enough space in the precincts to handle the distancing that will be required for the voting machines, the poll workers, and the like? So that's the basis of the assessment that we made for all 16 of the sites in Dare County. Referring to my June 6th memorandum, we outlined the changes that we are recommending. You also have a package in front of you today that lists the schools, a layout of each of the schools, and one facility that's not a school, and photographs, interior and exterior photographs of each of the sites that we are recommending.
If you want those to be shown on.
Oh,
the screen,
yes.
You can let Pam know as you come.
Okay.
You can name which one.
Pam, so I'm going to go down and talk about, or at least list each one of them. So for election day, we are recommending 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different schools. Pam, Kitty Hawk Elementary School, the gym. That is the Kitty Hawk Elementary School. It's the gym. We're recommending that it become the precinct for what is now the Southern Shores precinct, which is the Pitt Center. This is much more spacious and gives us the opportunity for social distancing in the precinct. Pam, there should be 1 or 2 more of the Kitty Hawk Elementary School, photographs of the Kitty Hawk Elementary School. Oh, that's the only one. Okay. Well, board members, in front of you is a layout of the Kitty Hawk Elementary School with dimensions.
Let me interrupt you
Yes,
just a second.
absolutely.
The Kitty Hawk School, does that have a Kitty Hawk or Southern Shores? Which precinct is it in? Do you know, Michelle?
It's in Kitty Hawk.
It's, I'm not.
I know where it is. I'm
Oh.
just, but the line is funky through there and I'm just
Yeah,
asking.
I was just going to make that comment, that it is really tricky in that area. Whether, I'm not sure what, it's called the Kitty Hawk Elementary School as opposed to the Southern Shores Elementary School. I cannot give you an answer as to whether that is physically in Kitty Hawk or Southern Shores. If you go down that street, down 158, just a little further, it is clearly Southern Shores. I am not sure that the school itself, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but we'll need to find that out to see if it's in the same precinct.
Number 2, the First Flight Middle School gym. Pam, the First Flight Middle School gym. The First Flight Middle School gym would become the voting precinct for Kill Devil Hills and Collington. We know from the past that, to begin with, KDH, Kill Devil Hills, is the largest precinct in Dare County, the number of voters. And, you know, when the polls close at 7 o'clock, there are people waiting in line, and that's without social distancing. And we've talked in previous board meetings about what we could do to improve the situation in Kill Devil Hills. At any rate, that is the, so Pam, do you only have one photograph for the middle school gym, First Flight Middle School gym? Okay, yes. And there should be a layout too. Do you see? No layouts. Okay. Well, board members, you have in front of you the layout and the dimensions of the gym. It was our, okay.
One of the reasons, if you notice in this picture, there are there's an entrance and an exit that are far apart from each other. If you remember, Collington is the fire station on the second floor for the voting, and you only have one staircase going up and down. So everybody goes through the same door, through the same hallway, into the room. So social distancing in Collington would just be about impossible.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens at the at the
Town hall.
town hall. You go in one door, and then you all pile up in the corner, and then you all come out the same one door. So if you'll notice this picture, by spreading the space out, we have them coming in, moving around, and going out without contact if we need that social distancing. That's why this is better than, this is possibly safer than both of the other locations. That's why this one was looked at. Sorry, go ahead.
The gym is certainly, the gym is 103 feet, and you have this package in front of you, board members. The gym is 103 feet by 83, almost 84 feet. There is certainly plenty of room in there to have two precincts, two sites, one on one end of the building, another on the other end of the building. So it is the recommendation, our recommendation, that the First Flight Middle School gym become the voting precinct for Kill Devil Hills and Collington.
And James,
Yes.
excuse me, the Kitty Hawk School is in tax district Southern Shores. So it's in Southern
Oh, great.
Shores.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, it's real funky there as to what's Southern Shores and what's Kitty Hawk. So let me go back. Being that it's in the tax district of Southern Shores, is that resolve the question you
Yes.
asked, Sandy? Okay. Nags Head Elementary School. We're recommending that it become the voting precinct for Nags Head. Nags Head Town Hall is the room where the commissioners meet, as we're all aware, is currently the voting site for Nags Head. And the gym is the elementary school gym is just a much better facility, much more room. Social distancing can be done in there very well, spread everything out. And entering and exiting, we solved that problem.
Yeah,
with the
entering and exiting are excellent.
Yeah.
Manio High School gym would become the voting precinct for Manio. And the same with all of these the schools, they just give us infinitely more space, and social distancing is not a problem at all with any of these gym facilities. Sandy, you had asked a question about the elementary school as opposed to the high school. We looked at the high school because it was recommended to us, and it has a couple of benefits over the elementary school. Cape Hatteras Secondary School Auditorium. In your package. This is the auditorium that's in front of us on the screen. That seating is like the seating in a gym. It pushes back to the wall. So all of that seating gets pushed back to the wall, and we have a wide open space where you're looking at seating. In the package in front of you, you will see we actually looked at two facilities at the Cape Hatteras Secondary School. We initially looked at the gym, which would have been just fine for most purposes, and we looked at the auditorium. We looked at the gym first, dimensions being 110 feet by 103 feet, but it was somewhat problematic because it was a little further away from the parking area, the parking lot. And we thought that would be, Ken, do you want to speak to that since you were very vocal on that?
167 feet from the curb. You park behind the curb, then you have to walk up 167 feet, do a couple little dog legs in and out, and then you get into the doorway. By the time you get to the doorway and you happen to be over 45, you're so tired, you forgot what you went there for. So it was okay if you were, a 25-year-old athlete who could sprint up. I think it was just extremely far away, and especially in November when it's cold and dark and possibly wet. That's why.
And for curbside.
So yeah, it presented a problem for both
Yes.
voters and for curbside.
Curbside voting would be almost impossible.
We were fortunate there, or lucky is the other word to use, that they had an auditorium, which was it was right next to the parking area. And you can see on the layout, the graphic layout, that it just works fine. And it has enough space to accommodate our voting needs there. So while it's smaller than the gym, it's large enough to serve our needs.
And this is for Pheasant and Buxton.
So this would be for yes, no,
Frisco.
it's for Frisco
In Frisco,
and
yeah.
Buxton.
Right.
Frisco. In Buxton is the Fessenden Annex building, but it would be the voting precinct for Buxton and Frisco. And the school itself is in Buxton.
And this would be for early voting as well?
So let me come back to that.
Okay.
So this would be for the November the 3 election, all of the schools that I mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 schools. 2 again been combined. Collington and Kill Devil Hills would be combined in the facility. I don't mean we're putting the poll workers together, but the facility would serve both. And the secondary school, Cape Hatteras Secondary School in Buxton, would be the facility for Buxton and Frisco for November the 3rd. Early voting. We are recommending that the elementary school, the secondary school in Buxton serve as the early voting site also. The good news is that the auditorium is not used anywhere near as much as other school facilities. So I'm not going to say it doesn't compromise the school operation. I will say that it doesn't compromise the school operation as much as if we had picked another facility other than the auditorium in the secondary school there. So it offers the benefit of serving as an early voting site. Presumably most of the voters going there for early voting would be voters on Hatteras Island, but as we all know, voters could go there from anywhere in the county and vote. It is absolutely impossible to see how we could do any kind of social distancing in the Pheasanton Center Annex. That little building is just not small enough. So again, we were just fortunate that, and this is in Buxton, and the Pheasanton Center Annex is in Buxton. So we're not changing the village or the town where it's located. We're just moving from
And
one.
it's just right down the
And
street
it's just
also.
right down the street.
Yeah.
And we're just
Very
changing
close.
from one site to the other. So in each of these, we looked at the size, we looked at convenience, we looked at parking, the need for curbside voting. It is clear in some of the schools that we will have to do some real signage, which we really haven't had to do much of in our present 16 sites in Dare County, but for some of the schools. So signage is something that's new for us, and we'll do that. We've had a good working relationship with in setting up these various meetings and visiting the sites with the representative from the Dare County Board of Education. That will be a close coordination with the Board of Education to make this work. And we expect a close coordination between our staff and the head of facilities at the school department. Ken?
The school also said that they have all the facilities we need from their IT people to talk to our IT people, because we do need some communication, and we need some closed circuitry, I believe, is what you, I don't know what. to get the-
Internet.
They can hook up everything we need. Our people, just tell them and they'll hook it up with our people. So we found out that the communications is fine. It's not like some of the locations that we went to, that we looked at in the past, that couldn't do communications. Besides that, do you remember what Frisco looks like? No, there's the room in the fire department at the south end of the building that you walk through the hall, get to the little office. So that's absolutely no social distancing. Plus, remember Frisco, unless you get there at the right time, probably has as bad as parking as Hatteras does. So the school is a much better location and a lot more social distancing.
Okay, so are the schools coordinating with the county to run that fiber optic?
Not until we didn't tell them anything. We're telling you guys, we're gonna hopefully vote on today, that's what we're doing today.
Okay, but what I'm asking, is the county aware that
Yes,
they're gonna have to run fiber optic to hook up at the schools?
they won't have to run a fiber optic. They'll be able to do something
Yeah.
different.
The schools have the facility, they gotta know whatever the secret codes or their machines talk to our machines.
I've talked to Dare County IT, and they will be able to accommodate us if that's what we need to do.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
there's a decision made. And it wouldn't be necessary in all of the locations.
Okay, and if we move Collington and Frisco, we have to notify, is it all the voters in those precincts or all the
Have to
residents?
Notify all of the
All.
voters
Let's
for
change.
each precinct of whatever change was made. We'd have to do a mailing.
Yeah, it was 90 days before the election or 90 days before early voting. I don't
For the
remember.
election.
That's
The election, not early voting, just the election, okay. That's why we're doing it now.
Jim, go
I do have
ahead.
a question.
Go ahead.
When you viewed these sites and visited these sites, did you look at where curbside could be?
Yes.
What about restrooms? Because if
Yes.
if school is in session, are there restrooms that are where they wouldn't be going into?
The
the school?
That's
Rooms
right,
are
out in the
specific
gym.
to the gym.
Each facility has restrooms there and there within so most of these are gyms. Only one is a auditorium. So all of the gyms and the auditorium both have restrooms there, right there.
Okay, so they wouldn't voters wouldn't be going, or even poll workers wouldn't be going within the school for any reason.
That's correct. And the beauty of these schools and these specific facilities is that gyms are a little bit separated from the rest of the school. The classrooms are here, the gym is here. The auditorium is certainly separated a little bit from the rest of the school, the secondary school. Now there are 2 classrooms. If you look at this layout that's in front of you here, that I'm sorry that the audience won't be able to see. That lays out, it shows the gym and the auditorium, and the entrance that we are showing here, which is on the side. There are 2 classrooms right there in the same building, but they can close off those 2 classrooms from the rest of the building, and the auditorium is in the rest of the building. So the beauty of these specific facilities is that we can isolate, that the facilities themselves are isolated from the rest of the school. And so there's no need for interaction between voters and the pupils and the students in the school.
Okay, do we have any places identified in there for security that we can lock things up in overnight?
We didn't look at that.
I mean, it could be an equipment locker.
Yeah, they have all-
I am sure that the answer is yes. When you look at some of the sites we are currently using, if they can secure, then there's no question that these facilities can secure.
They do all have equipment rooms, and they all have staff rooms also. They also have separate rooms for the coaches. They have a bunch of rooms all around the schools, yeah.
And in the worst case, if they didn't, but I absolutely accept what Ken just said. In the worst case, we could lock the gym. I mean, in some of the precincts we use now, we lock the facility. That's the only way, because there are no
Well, they're
secure
supposed to.
rooms.
But within that facility, they have to have somewhere a cabinet, a filing drawer, or something that everything's locked into. So even the smallest of locations, we have everything secured.
The answer is yes. I mean, Ken gave the answer.
Yes, the schools, we have all kinds of security. The kids right now are probably more security than any of our voting places, only because of all the, the killings and all these other stuff. The schools are overly secured. I mean, if you go to any one of the parking lots, even off-season, like now, when the kids are there, the sheriff, police cars in there. I mean, all I have is a half a dozen staff members in there, but they got the sheriff's car in there anyhow in the parking lots.
We just want to be sure that the public feels safe, because there would be many people on the grounds that would not necessarily be on the grounds, or would not even be allowed on the grounds or inside the building.
Yeah, the concern is somebody getting inside. It could even be a staff person.
Yeah,
And so it needs to be, that's why it needs to be separate from the room.
Yes.
Again, the beauty here is that we're talking about gyms, and in one instance, an auditorium, and they're sort of separate from the rest. We're not talking about a big room in the middle of classrooms.
Right.
The gyms, for the most part, are at the end of the building, the beginning of the building, to the side of the building. They are almost separate facilities. So,
they're isolated from
Yeah.
the main buildings.
Okay, and both precincts that are going to be sharing space will be manned differently so that we can keep those precinct numbers straight.
and they're big
And
enough
separated.
to
Yeah.
spread them out.
Yeah, big enough to spread way out.
What about?
So,
I'm sorry, one more
Let
question.
me, go ahead.
What about a dedicated space for the poll workers to go and take a break, or to eat their meal, because they have to bring food, medication, water, drinks, whatever they have, to be there for the day? So were there areas that they could go off that would be kind of private for them, or?
I'm not sure in each instance if they are separate areas. I can't answer that, but the building is large enough to accommodate them segregating themselves from the voting activities. If you look at some of the precincts that we use. I'm thinking about the Fessenden Center Annex as an example. That's a small building and there's no separate area there. I'm thinking about the Hatteras
Frisco.
Community Building. There's no separate area and there's nothing to do that there. Frisco, there's no place to do that unless you sit down on one of the fire trucks and do it. So as we see it, all of these schools have advantages. None of them have the disadvantages that some of our current precincts do. There is no place in Frisco to do what you just asked. There's no place in the Hatteras Community Building to do what you just asked. There's no place even in Duck to do that.
Well, I know Frisco and different ones have refrigerators, or they have like that little kitchen area just off from their voting site. So we just need to make sure that our poll workers have a space that they can go and take a deep breath and drink something, eat something, so it
And
doesn't
take
look
their
like
mask
they're-
off if they need a break
Yes.
for a few
So-
minutes. And now at Cape Hatteras, they have, as you go in the hallway,
Yeah.
there is like a snack bar in there.
Yes.
And that might be equipped to where that would work there. It's been a long time since I've been in Kitty Hawk and I can't remember what they might have. But that's something.
No,
that's
they
gonna
don't
be-
need Kitty Hawk either. Again, these schools are large enough, the facilities are large enough to accommodate some separation, even if they don't have a break room. And, and there are some sort of separate little areas, in the gym, it's a big room, and then there's the gym, and then the locker rooms and bathrooms and stuff. So the facility itself is large enough to accommodate plenty of separation.
Most of the gyms have facilities for their staff, for their gym
Right.
people, et cetera.
Right.
So they all have rooms on the side. I'm sure if we asked nicely, they'd leave the coach's room open so they can go in there and sit down and have a sandwich and whatever they want. I mean, the schools have all kinds of facilities built into the, built into.
They have all kinds of convenient restrooms too. That's not an issue at all.
Okay, this is our best case scenario. We
Right.
know that no matter what happens, we're gonna have to social distance and stuff. So what about the worst case scenario?
This is the worst case scenario.
Oh, no. No, if we don't get enough poll workers, then we have to start combining
Well, I
poll
mean, for
workers.
facilities, I mean, we're not touching that yet. I'm talking about for facilities. This accommodates the worst case, and the worst case scenario is social distancing. The best case scenario is we don't have to social distance. None of us think that'll be the case in November. The worst case scenario from a facility standpoint is that we've got to have enough room for at least 6 feet apart. All of these facilities give us the ability to do that, both inside the precinct and outside of the precinct. Michelle, you stopped me from making a point, and if I weren't as old as I am, that would not be a problem, but.
Wasn't it about taking a break?
I'm sorry, but other questions, Sandy, Judy, Michelle, other questions about any of these?
We're just talking facility, not people.
Right.
We got the place, now we'll figure out how to fill them up.
Yeah, I just made a note to add number 9 to our communications document. That is to give,
Recruiting.
to really communicate this to people.
Oh,
Because a
absolutely.
lot of people are going to be, huh? So-
That was my point, Judy, earlier when I said, I think that there's some serious messaging that we should do like next week in communicating with voters. One, and I won't beat this to death, I think we should have a piece of communication that tells voters what we're working on to help them out and to make this a safe election for them. Separate from what's here, but Judy, that would be an element in there to give voters advance notice of what we are working on to make life good for them.
Some of the things, I think live streaming is helping. People are watching those live streams. And, but some of this, we're not gonna know until we put the call out for poll workers. It took us from July to, when did Sandra get called for poll work? The night before training?
Yeah.
To get to the 105. And now they've added 4 more positions. That's another 67 people. I don't know how we're going to do that. We need to get at least a first indication from these poll workers whether they think they're going to be willing to work, so that we know where we are. And then once we have that, then we might have to go back and look at what other precincts to combine so that we have enough people to handle it. And I think that's going to be the toughest part of the job.
I think you're right, Sandy. All of us are on the same wavelength there. I chatted with Michelle the other day and asked her a question about poll workers. I think you're absolutely right. Again, this is just dealing with facilities.
I understand.
But it wasn't a hard choice for us to suggest combining Kill Devil Hills and Carlington in a single facility, because the facility is large enough to accommodate that.
Yeah.
And it was not a hard choice for us to suggest combining Frisco and Buxton into a single facility.
And Kitty Hawk and Southern Shores.
Right, because it's large enough to accommodate combining two.
With lots of room.
Are
And
you
it-
going to combine Kitty Hawk with Southern Shores?
No.
Oh, we're not?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
And in other jurisdictions, the states and elsewhere, schools are often voting sites. And as I think Jim reminded me, some areas, Chicago might be one, Illinois,
Yeah.
that the voting day is a holiday. So people are not
Voting
right there,
day
so
is
they
a
expect
holiday.
to go and vote and go to a school. So the schools are not in session and they typically use schools. So this was, it was sort of a no-brainer for us.
Well, when we get that other information, then we can go back and look and decide. We will have to tailor the precincts to the available workers.
Right.
Sure.
And that's going to be a chore,
That is.
because there's going to,
And it's
nobody
gonna be-
wants it to be their precinct, but
Yeah.
we're just going to have to do what we have to do.
Also, in my not notice, but memorandum to the Board of Education, asking them to reserve the dates for us. Michelle made me aware, and I made them aware that we're actually not asking for 1 day, we're asking for 3 days.
Right.
The day before for drop off and set up, and the day after for breakdown and take away. And I won't dwell on it now, but it is possible that we'll need the day before that. No, we won't need. The day before that will be just drop off the sneeze guards. So they don't need to close. All we're doing, that's just a delivery deal. So, because we're asking because we will be asking the school department to do something different and sort of special for us. We've made every attempt to be as accommodating in our thinking through this and in our messaging to them, asking them to just reserve these dates for us.
And it may be that we would need, and most likely would need, to have the Friday before the Monday. So the Friday before the election day, the sneeze guards or any of that sort of thing that we would need to drop off would need to be delivered on that Friday before, because the same people that will be delivering the equipment on Monday would be the same people that would be delivering it,
The sneeze guards
delivering
on
the
Friday.
sneeze guards. And there will be so many of those that we would not have room to ship those at the same time. Plus we have to protect our equipment and supplies as well as protect the sneeze guards. And I have a image of those to share with you eventually.
And I've made them aware in this memorandum to them when I asked them to reserve dates, that's a possibility we might, but that's drop off only. They don't need to interrupt any school activity for us to just drop off the sneeze guards. So, you know, we have thought, not I've thought, we thought through if we were on the other side of the table, if we were the school board, the school department, what information would we like and how soon would we'd like to receive it. So that was the idea behind this June 6th, June 7th email, which each of you got a copy of just for informational purposes, just to tell them what our thinking was, give them some advance notice that this is where we think we're heading. Again, the gyms in most of these schools are in high demand for extracurricular stuff. So, in a way, that was where we were headed.
Okay, so what are we calling this? Phase one? Phase one of site planning?
No, we're not calling it that. What the committee is recommending today is that these are the changes. We're not recommending any other site changes today. In our assessment, and you should be aware that there is now in the office a layout of each of the 16 precincts and photographs inside and out of each of the 16 precincts. We think that's needed here in the office and it wasn't available, so now it's there. These are the only site changes that we're recommending at this point. So, and we don't see that we'll need to make some other decision down the road, but it might be. So the recommendation in our proposal motion is that these are the changes that we're making. Obviously, everything else remains the same.
Okay.
I'd be happy, Ken, Jim, to elaborate on anything that I've said and
Talk to
any questions from Judy or Sandy about any of this stuff.
Nope. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the voting locations as presented just now.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
It goes without saying that we will now have to make a formal request to the Board of Education, and that we being staff will make the notifications necessary to the voters and to the State Board of Election.
Well, I would hold off to the voters until,
So state.
I'll notify the state board, and then
Yeah.
what we would have to do is we would have to do a resolution, the board would have to do a resolution that would make these changes to submit. So I will check with the state board and find out the process of all of this and try to have something for you at our next meeting to have the steps in line for us to take if necessary.
yeah, and
Well-
I would think that by July, we want to contact those poll workers and see if there's going to have to be further changes.
Well, I wouldn't put a time frame on who we notify who, but I would like to offer a motion now that would accommodate what Michelle just said, which is that we take all, so I move that we take all necessary steps, including those required with the State Board of Elections and Board of Education, to implement the changes required to change the site locations. That to me sounds, so Michelle, if the State Board requires us to be A, B, and C, then this motion covers that we take the necessary steps to implement this. So we don't have to delay it. Is that?
We still don't know at this point in time whether we have to do this or not.
We would have to do a resolution and we'd have to notify the state and they'd have to make the approval. But I will.
What my motion is that we are approving taking all necessary steps to implement that. Now, if they've got some specific language, then we'll look at that. But my motion hopefully is comprehensive enough that you can do it, because it says that we take the necessary steps to implement this.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
All right.
All opposed? Michelle, when you contact the state, please find out what is the latest. We can notify them if we have to start eliminating precincts. So that we keep that on the calendar and don't miss that, because that one we have to take back to them too.
This is just for this coming election. It's not
Right.
permanent. It's just for this election. Okay.
Yeah.
Want to make sure we.
Clarification on that, yeah. Number 2, purchasing. Sandy initiated some time ago, a couple meetings ago, questions about purchasing decisions. And it was then picked up on by several other board members. Michelle has furnished us, all the board members, with a list of all vendors that we used and are using in various purchases that this board makes to implement voting. And we were all furnished with the costs for pencils and ballots and everything that we purchase.
Excuse me. I had a list that I pulled for the vendors that we used in the last election, but I'm pretty sure that it wasn't all the items, and it might not have been all the vendors either, because we didn't have to order everything last time.
Correct.
So if there's an updated thing, I've never received it.
That's to say that we reviewed all information that was available to us. We look at this upcoming election in November as being a little different. We expect the voter turnout to be heavier. We are faced with some PPE issues that we haven't been faced with in the past. It is our conclusion that now is not the time to make changes in purchasing decisions. Let's take ballots as an example, because there have been questions about the ballots and could we get them printed cheaper. Let me back up to say that the purchasing that is currently being done and the manner in which it is being done is in compliance with the Dare County purchasing policy. At what level of purchasing is bidding required, and et cetera. Let's take PPE first. We do not yet know what the state will actually be supplying to Dare County with respect to shields, gloves, masks. To the extent that the state does not or will not be supplying PPE supplies, the county will supply it. So we don't have to go out and purchase gloves and shields, face shields. The county will supply that to us. I assume that there is now a central sort of buying in the county, and I assume, but I'm not locking them in on that, that comes from the emergency management folk. I assume that, I don't know. But wherever it is currently being done, they will make those purchases for us. We don't have to go out and purchase any of the PPE supplies. And it's possible the state will supply some of that, but we just don't know. So let's get back to the other purchases that that this board through the staff currently makes. When you look at what's happened in other jurisdictions with problems arising, Georgia, a couple of counties in Georgia being the latest about a week ago, we don't want any surprises at the last minute. We want ballots to work. We want machines to work. And I and a couple of us have had a couple of extensive conversations with Michelle about ballots, because that's been something that's been raised a couple of times.
That's also in statute, by the way.
And I have been impressed, persuaded by Michelle's comments relating to the safety and the certainty and the validity of ballots that that are ballots we have purchased from a company that has a relationship with the supplier manufacturer of our voting machines, and the ballots are tested and then they run through another iteration of testing. So we can feel fairly comfortable that we won't have problems with our ballots from our current vendor. Michelle, do you want to elaborate on the ballots? Because we've talked about it a bit.
Well, the ballots, when they're coded and then they're printed, but they're printed on a certain weight of paper, certain length of paper, and all of those are processed. They're sent through testing of equipment, like the equipment that we have. The printer also has that equipment so that they can feed it through this equipment to test to make sure that the cut is correct, that the barcode is reading properly, that the weight of the paper is proper, because if any of that is off, then it will not feed through our equipment the way it is supposed to. So there's an assurance in knowing that there's that relationship between the coding and the printing, the testing, and providing of testing before it ever comes to us, so that we know what we receive will work in our equipment and we won't have issues with that. And at this time in an election, like we've already have enough going on as it is, we don't know what's coming, but we know that if we're printing the ballots at the same company that have been printing them for years and print most of North Carolina's ballots and other states' ballots, then we know that we're working with a vendor that has looked out for us and that worked well with us. We have a good rapport with them. And as County Manager Bobby Outen said, why mess with something right now in the middle of all that's going on? If we were to save $1,000, it would be $1,000, but you wouldn't have that security of knowing that the printer you've been using has that assurance and the relationship that we have. So my recommendation is that we stay with the printer that we have.
So there's a level of comfort specifically with the ballots, because there have been questions raised about the ballots. And we don't know that we would save money by going with another vendor.
Well,
But let me just, and then I'll open it up. But even if we would save dollars, the potential savings are minimal and it's not worth the risk in our judgment. Sandy?
How about sending a thing to the state? And because there's a problem in statute, it says that the bids will be put out every year. And it has never been done in Dare County because Dare County's bid rules were different. The state doesn't put a limit on it. Other than that, I'm certainly willing to let go of that, but there's a whole lot of products that have to be printed that don't have the sensitivity of ballots that I think need to be bid out.
So, it is, and we did have this conversation with, Michelle mentioned the county manager's name. And I'm not saying this to put him on the spot because he's not here and he can speak for himself. In any of these areas, we don't know if we would save money by putting it out to bid. But even with the potential of saving minimal dollars, given this election, we don't see that it's worth the risk. We are in compliance with the county policy. The county has negotiated agreements with, say, like Staples and whoever else for the Board of Election and every other department in the county. And the county is satisfied with those relationships and with those agreements and the pricing we get. And so to go in a different direction just doesn't seem to outweigh any potential benefit. And we don't know that there will even be a benefit, but it doesn't seem to, the county has gone through this. And to make purchasing agents out of a 2.5-person staff, given all the complications that they will be faced with between now and November, just doesn't seem to warrant it.
Well, the staff should not be working with bids. It's supposed to go through the finance office in Dustin. And the problem I'm having with this is y'all have had these conversations. You've obviously had a conversation with Bobby. You've had a conversation with Michelle, but we don't know what was said there. We don't know what was presented. And I think that's a really bad way to do business. I think there is value when we can get bids. And I mean, a lot of this stuff is no-brainers. All these cards and stuff we have to send out, they send out cards all the time here. It's just not a big deal. The printing, like with the instructions and stuff, that's not a big deal. If we can get those done locally, avoid the shipping, maybe save a few dollars in addition to that, but pump that money back into this economy, I think that that's an important point to consider. That's just my feeling.
I think that the instructions could go to Staples or a printer
That's not
somewhere
our
here.
economy.
But it doesn't matter, wherever it would be in this county would be fine. But when we're talking about the provisional and absentee ballots and all the lining and all the setup that the state board sends directly to the printer, I just feel like we need to stay where we are with all of our supplies like that. Now, you made a point at the last meeting about the instructions. If we have thousands of absentee ballots, or if we have a lot more of absentee ballots by mail, surely it makes sense to go to a printer outside of our office, because our office, we would print those instructions through our office printer. But it would make complete sense to go somewhere off-site and have those printed. But the envelopes and the ballots and all these other things that have to be done.
Well, I think the absentee envelopes, the ones that they send back, I think the new law and some of the stuff we've gotten from Caitlin, I think that the state is actually going to print those and send them because of the new barcodes or whatever they want on them,
We're gonna have codes.
or whatever. So those are probably off our
Very
list.
specific.
Yes, but there's all kinds of things that we print. And I don't have a level of comfort with this.
Could you be more specific in your unreadiness? I mean, I'm prepared to be.
I don't see
open-minded.
what the big deal is with putting a list together of the items that we're going to need and the specs and giving it to a couple of local printers, not corporations that are going to ship the money out of here, and see how close they are. That's just not rocket science.
Do we have a local printer that even wants to get involved in it?
How do we know? We've never asked.
I don't know.
We've got at least 15 printers here. When this all started years ago, we didn't have any printers. They had to send things out of area. But that's changed, and they're losing a ton of money because they do all the cards and the invites and the handouts for all these events that have been canceled. So, I think under the circumstances, I think it's important to do what we can to support our community, not to beef up our bill, but to support our community when we can do it. That's my
You're
story.
talking about the non-essentials, you're talking about the non-ballots, you're talking about
Right.
all the little cards that say come in.
Envelopes
I-
and stuff
yeah.
like that.
I agree, I'd like to see some of that local printing. Some of the instructions, some of the cards, some of the things like that.
Yeah, those aren't technical kind of things.
Yeah, the non-technical stuff that's not gonna go through a machine or count as a ballot. But yeah, there's a whole list of other stuff that we have. Especially the stuff that you normally print in-house. That could be locally printed.
Are you comfortable coming up with this list of non-essential items that we might look at?
I can make a list.
Sandy, I'd like to react to one thing you said is that, and I think you were leaving out staples to say we can look at. If we go down this road, then we've got to look at staples also along with other printers. So
Well, we do if we put it out for general bid and send it to everybody. But my understanding from the last time this came up was that we could pick 2 or 3 people to send it to and send them the specs and see if they wanted to send in a bid for it. And the same thing with the companies that we've been using in the past. They should have to bid this if we go to a bidding process.
for non-essential items, the kinds of things we're talking about, including some of the new stuff that you all will be recommending, I think that's fair game. Although I don't want us to be, let us not pick winners and losers here. Let us not pick who we're going to send it to and who we're not going to send it to.
My point would be to send it to everybody.
Well, that's the
Yeah,
point
I mean,
made.
I know a few printers that I deal with, but I know that there's other good ones out there too.
That's the comment I made because you were seeming to suggest we don't send it to staples. And I'm saying we're not picking winners and losers here. If we're going to open it up, then we open it up. I am fearful that of all the things in front of us between now and November, that we're overloading our 2.5 person staff. I just I don't see us making a purchasing agent out of our 2.5 person.
They're not
staff.
supposed to be doing the purchasing. It's supposed to be through Dustin and finance.
That is not correct. That is
That's
not
what he told me.
That is not consistent with Dare County policy. There are vendors that have been accepted and approved by the county, and our staff makes those purchases. Am I right or am I not
I
right?
order them, yes.
The relationships are established by the county, and through those relationships, if we have to purchase pens, we purchase pens from who the county has established a relationship with. If we have to purchase paper, we establish a relation. We pay through the relationship that the county has established.
But James, the county is not ordering all of our election stuff. They're ordering the office stuff, but they're not doing the mailing cards, the ballots, the envelopes. They're not doing any of that. They're doing the pencils and pads, but they're not doing all the rest of the stuff. You're ordering them
I
through,
order everything that goes through our office.
and everything goes through the county?
Everything that pertains to my office, I order.
Okay, what about the ballots?
I order.
You ordered the ballots through the company that supplies our machines. All of the auxiliary forms, you're ordering them through the same company that does the ballots?
Are you talking about the
mailing cards that say you haven't voted for 2 years?
No, that's a different company.
And who are they? You're voting, are they through the
There's a
county?
company that prints our ballots and there's another company that prints our confirmation cards or verification cards.
Are they local or
No,
are they through the county?
no.
They're through Greensboro. They're in Greensboro.
Okay, so those are the people we could look to see if anybody in their county would do. That's what we're talking about. The ones through Greensboro, we could see if anybody locally wants to do the same thing at the same price or cheaper. The ones that go through the machine, they stay with that same company.
The ballots.
Yes, the balance of that material stays there. But the other printing, we could try locally. That was the list, James, that I was talking about, to see if they can do locally.
Yeah. I
The
got it.
cards, the postcards, the I'm sorry you died, I'm sorry you're living, all the things.
I'm sorry you died, I'm sorry you're living. Yes,
Let me just-
Staples.
Let me just ask a question. So the postcards that we send out to verify the address of a voter, who prints those?
But, custom creative printing. That's out of Greensboro.
Yeah. Those are the kind of things we could see if they
Had
can
no
print.
issues with them. Had no issues with them in their printing. I'm just nervous about changing up anything that we don't have to change at this point with so much that's going on, so much that's coming on. And I understand that there are printers, people that you know that are having difficulty with not being able to charge people or not being able to have business because of things being canceled. But at this point in time, my focus is on this election, what's already changed up. There's a lot that would have to go into play to have this changed. And I think we have a good working relationship with this company, with all the companies that we work with. That's why we've stayed with them. That's why we've not changed anywhere. I don't know what the bidding was or anything that happened prior to me being here, but I know since I've been here, I've not had any trouble with my ballot printers. I've not had any trouble with my envelope or card printers. And I just feel like there's so much changing. Look at the way this meeting has gone today, just talking about what the plan of the plan of the plan is. My focus is on trying to keep this as simple as possible, not change up anything that's not broken. There's nothing broken with our forms, with our envelopes. I can show you all that we have in our stock. I just think we need to focus on our precincts, our poll workers, and the safety of the voters in this community so that they know that we're looking out for them and not trying to change an envelope when there's nothing wrong with the envelope.
Well, these-
Just another question. Who prints these right off the top of your head?
These were printed at Staples. And we can also copy them in our office.
I guess my overriding thought, which I, at the risk of being redundant, is that we have a 2.5 person staff. I am sensitive to the fact, not just the notion, that they are working hard and they've got more work to do between now and November because of all the special circumstances. And to overload the staff, if we're gonna have another person and make a purchasing agent out of that person and send out bids, then that's something else. But
James, all we asked for was a list of the forms that are non-essential.
and then Michelle can do that.
I can do
and we'll
that.
do that.
At that point, then we'll discuss that later. All I asked for is that, I agree with Sandy. I'd like to see the list, what's on it, how many, okay? And maybe talk to 1 or 2 people just casually. Could you do this? And see what happens.
Well, I don't think you want to take it to that step. I mean, if we're gonna open this up and make it a formal process, I mean, me talking to a buddy over here is not the way to
Yeah, we
go.
have to be careful.
That's not the way to go.
Well, okay, let's get the list and figure out what to do with it from there. They don't have to do anything except generate that list.
Yeah,
which is
I mean,
someplace.
this stuff isn't rocket science. They do it all the time. And I've gotten all kinds of printing done through locals down here.
I think each of us have. I know I have. It's not the question of whether it's Rocket staff. We've got a 2.5-person staff. And trying to now make them, in addition to everything else they've got to do, purchasing agents with the possibility, not the certainty, that we can save $1 or $2 is just, I mean.
The bids would be the deciding factor. So they're not purchasing agents. Dustin is the person.
Well, that's not the present that's not the way that operates currently. Dustin doesn't do this purchasing for this board. None of it.
But he will run the bid process.
You don't know that.
I do know that. I've got it in writing because I asked him, how do we do this?
Let's
You want to
get-
share that
let's
with the
get-
rest of us?
Let's
get
get
the
everything
list.
together
Okay.
and
Let's
discuss it
get-
at the
yeah.
next meeting.
Please, right.
Yeah.
Let's get the list, see what it looks like, how many,
I'll have the list at the next meeting.
that's fine.
Okay.
That's all we ask.
Yeah.
We didn't ask you to call, write, nothing. We just asked you to make lunch, that's all.
Okay, new laws for 2020 election.
I'm not quite finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sandy. So the last thing on my list, our list, is, we've looked at, what I call table guards and some people call sneeze guards, and looks like most people refer to it as sneeze guards. In front of you is a,
Did you get them?
oh, they didn't, okay. Attached to one of my earlier emails was the sneeze guard that we were considering, which were made up by Dare County Buildings and Grounds. It's fair to say that we went in a different direction. And this is a sneeze guard, 36 inches by 36 inches, sit on the table, that we are recommending. If you haven't been in Michelle, in the Board of Elections office, you'll see the one that the county came up with, which was using PVC pipes and plastic. But anyway, this is the one that we are recommending. It's much more attractive. It serves the purpose very well. And there could be some permanency about this, in that we could use it more than one time. We could use it down the road. So this is the sneeze guard we're recommending. And I think a decision has to be made on this at today's meeting fairly quickly so that they can purchase.
What's the cost?
Sneeze guard.
I think it was 150.
About 150.
150.
Oh, I thought you said, what's it called?
No, I think it's about.
Stop. That's the one that was $157?
Yes,
Yeah.
157.
That's the same one?
Yes.
All right.
We'd probably
need a
need
lot.
6 to 8 at each pole.
Yes, we've got the number. Yeah.
How large is that?
36
Cutout.
by 36. Oh, the cutout at the bottom.
It was going to be, Dustin said we could order them large enough for a paper to go through.
5 by 9 or something like that, in that
Something by 12.
brochure you sent me, had the dollars on it. It was 36 by 36 and it was 9.5 inches wide. The hole,
So that's,
But they were
Back,
going,
yeah.
they could
have
cut
to go
it,
that way.
they could cut it so that it would just be enough for paper to go under so that it would protect the.
Yeah, this is it's about 9
Have
inches
a
this
level,
way,
yes,
so you can fit them in,
yes.
yeah. See, I read it, see that?
So I would recommend and ask for a vote so that we can put this in motion and start working on it, that to actually buy them. The county manager has blessed it, and that we go forward and use these sneeze guards for our voting purposes. And I so move.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
That, Sandy, is our report, although should say, Jim, you will have any additional comments, anything that we should talk further about? Can't lunch?
Really?
That's it, Sandy.
Okay, new laws for 2020. I'm still absorbing them. Obviously, we have a ton of new ones dealing with absentee voting. There's some changes to the student poll worker thing. There's money available to help pay poll workers. It's $25,000 for our tier county. Only if we have all of our early voting sites open from, I think it's 7:30 to, what is it,
It was
Michelle?
8 to 7:30.
8 to 7:30,
Mhm.
which means running at least 2 shifts again, which is going to be hard for us. And we were hoping that we'd be given some flexibility. There's none. You can, I guess there's implied flexibility. You can do it if you don't want the 25,000, but the 25,000 to help pay poll workers goes away.
Yeah.
You know,
So I read through the new regulation quickly. So the statute sets it out, but the Board of Elections State Board has still not promulgated rules relating to this.
Right. right. Some will have to,
But you get enough to say you only get this money if you do this stuff.
but that's in the statute. That's,
That's
you
what
know,
I'm saying.
yeah. And there's still a lot of guidance that needs to come down from the state board on how to interpret some of this stuff.
Right.
I'm a little concerned because an earlier thing we had said that they would provide guidance in August. That's really late.
That is close.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think, we need to just keep watching the law and stay up. And if we're going to do something in particular that they haven't addressed yet, just address it with them and say, look, are we safe to move on this item? And so that we don't have to go back and redo anything.
I would also suggest that it would be nice to get the state money. But I think in the first glance, we ought to do what we want to do
Without that hanging out
without
there.
that hanging out there that we might get $25,000
Well,
from the state.
and the 25,000, if you're having to staff double every day, we might go in the hole with that if
Right.
we have those people to do that. So,
It's a
hopefully,
good thing to keep in the back of our minds, but let's
Right.
just proceed of what we'd
Yeah.
like to do here in Dare County without.
and there's other monies that are supposed to be split up between the counties based on voter registration, but I don't have a clue how they're going to do that. And I've made Bobby aware of that. The county knows that our budget at this point is fantasy, until all these things come down and we get
Yeah.
some numbers from the state. So, and they're quite aware of that.
Well, that surplus money with the SCAR is after they pay the bills, the tier 1, 2, and 3. If there's any left over from that, then it will be divided among the counties by voters. So if they run out of money, there isn't any left over.
That's right.
So that's also fantasy money.
Yeah. The whole thing is kind of fantasy. They used to say there's 99 counties in the state and Dare. I think it's time for us to go back to Dare. Okay, let's take,
Can you take a 10-minute break?
that's what I was going to say.
Good.
Um,
No, we're fast.
So
Dare County Board of Elections will come back into session. We will now go into closed session for a personnel issue. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to go in closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Dare County Board of Elections will go back into open session. There were no decisions made in closed session. Does anyone have any old business?
I
Make a
do.
motion, we go out of closed session.
Make a motion to go out of closed session. We make a motion to go into open session. All in favor?
Aye.
Just 1 second.
This is old business. I'd like to know the outcome of Cofield's complaint that was filed. Was it filed? And what was the reaction?
My information was that there is no conflict for you to be and remain on this board.
Oh, good. All right. Let's, just for the record, there is no conflict. There's no reason I can't be on this board. Thank you.
But I thought you just sent it to them this morning.
Well, I sent it to the state board of, the Board of Elections Executive Director who forwarded it. But then Bobby Outen contacted Bob Joyce. And, but I did send a request to the State Board of Elections, which is apparently my misinterpretation of what you were saying. I sent that this morning.
I think that's the
But there
answer
was
to
no-
Judy's question.
But from what I found out thus far, there was no conflict.
But that's the
But there
real
has
answer.
been an email sent to the state board for clarification as well.
And Judy, it's not my complaint. It was the action of this board.
Okay.
But that's the answer to the question you asked, is that the state hasn't responded.
Okay, James.
It's
Okay.
It's not complete yet.
To further clarify that, when the motion was made, the original motion in the meeting, there was nothing said about sending it to the state board. That was a clarification that was made later in the meeting. And for it to go to the state board as a body for determination, there must be a complaint filed. I asked twice, and James just kept saying, I stand by my motion. So Michelle finally asked him, did he want it to go to Karen or Caitlin? And he said, yeah, I want a determination from them.
No, I didn't. I never said that.
But if you go back and listen to the video, I said, so you want me to send it to Caitlin? And he said, no, I want you to send it to the state board. And in my mind, the state board is Karen and then Caitlin and then all the staff. But if you listen to the tape, he said, no, you send it to the state board and they will distribute it to Karen or Caitlin or whomever.
That's exactly
So that
what I
was
said.
my misinterpretation of what he was saying, because in my mind, the state board is the state board, the one I answer to, but it was really the state board members that he was referring to.
Well,
That's exactly the way it
That's
transpired.
when I listened back to the tape or to the
the,
video.
the last meeting really bothered me because I've always been a strong advocate of open government and transparency. And first of all, we went into an illegally closed session because you cannot discuss board members in closed session. You can only do that in open session. And we went in under the understanding that it was personnel. When we got in there and the allegations started being made against Judy as far as conflict of interest, I know the law well enough to know that she wasn't in conflict of interest, but I was very confused about the whole thing because it all seemed to go back to her position with the League of Women Voters, and yet the person making the most noise is an officer with the League of Women Voters, so that was kind of confusing to me. And then finally it dawned on me that we're discussing board members in a closed session. And I tried twice to get the conversation shut down. They refused to stop talking. So I called Bobby out and left a message and said, please come down here as soon as you can. Bobby Outen came in, gave us some answers, and that would come under attorney-client privilege. The privilege to that is ours, not his. We decide what to hold as privileged. We can change our mind on it whenever we want. Following that meeting, we received 2 emails from Bobby. And after we received those emails, I contacted the board and I said, these emails exonerate Judy. I think that we should release them because I'm getting calls. I blind copied everybody so that we wouldn't get a thread going. And if there had been any interest at all in doing that, I was going to call a meeting to get that done because it's unfair to leave those kind of allegations hanging over her head. I immediately heard back from James, who said, no, I stand by my motion. Well, there wasn't a motion left hanging out there that hadn't been satisfied. The part about when we came out of closed session, I announced that we had conferred with our attorney, which we had, but even that portion was not right because we never announced that there was going to be an attorney in there, and because I didn't know, nobody knew at that point. But it was a very bad situation. I think it's very unfair to make allegations and leave them hanging out there when you have other information that exonerates the person and makes it clear that they're not guilty of what you're hanging out there. For over a year, I have sat in meeting after meeting after meeting, being accused of things and not being given an opportunity to defend myself. And I'm not going to get into a food fight in the middle of a board meeting, and it has got to stop. So I could go ahead and tell you what the attorneys told us, but I won't do that out of respect for the board. The worst that would happen to me is that somebody would slap my hands. But I don't think that's the way open meetings law should be viewed. I talked to my personal attorney on this, who's represented me in several cases on open government issues in court. And the only way to mitigate that first part where we should not have been in there listed as a personnel issue is if we went to court, we were sued, then that's what the judge would order us to do, is to say, okay, what was said during there? Plus it would cost us money because we'd have to pay the other person's attorney's fees. So I would hope that we put an end to this. And that's what I have to say about that.
Well, I think it's unfortunate, but that you said all of that, and I was comfortable saying nothing, but you made certain allegations and suggestions that don't bear with the facts. One, when you sent an email that you suggested about Bobby Alton, I responded saying that you were trying to subvert the open meeting statute.
That's right, you did.
But you didn't say that a couple minutes ago when you said how I responded, did you? No, you didn't. Two, there were not allegations about Judy. There was a discussion of, and I don't want to go into, there weren't allegations. And the issue was conflict of interest. But you have twisted in your iteration of that you just went through to shape your narrative of what happened. And that's common with you. I mean, you always do that. But I mean, the rest of us understand that. And it is what it is. And that's how, one of the ways I responded to your email. And I specifically said that you were trying to subvert the open meeting law and that you knew better.
You certainly did. And I had the email printed out because I wanted to read it into the record today because when.
Excuse me, this is going to be a cat and dog fight. The question came up. She's concerned about her reputation, honor, whatever it is. The rest of you guys, until everything is final, let's just let it go. If you want to bring it up next week, I'm more than happy to listen to it. But at this point, I would like to adjourn our regular meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.